After 3 years as a morgue technician, I thought I'd seen everything. But when I discovered those unmarked files hidden behind the freezer units, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. 27 bodies had come through our facility in the past. 6 months, all listed as natural deaths, all with the same mysterious puncture wound that wasn't supposed to be there. My name is Lucas Harrow, and I spent 3 years working the night shift at County Memorial Morgue. It was the perfect job for someone like me, quiet, methodical, respectful. I prepared bodies for autopsy, maintained equipment, and kept meticulous records. Dr. Emily Carver, my supervisor, always praised my attention to detail. That attention to detail is what saved my life. It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed. Dr. Carver assigned me a rush job. Nathan Cole, 34, supposed heart attack victim. As I began the standard preparation, something caught my eye. Behind his left ear, barely visible, was a tiny puncture wound. Clean, precise, fresh. It wasn't mentioned anywhere in the paperwork. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I stared at that tiny wound. In 3 years, I'd never seen anything like it. Heart attack victims didn't have puncture wounds behind their ears. They had chest pain, shortness of breath, maybe some bruising from CPR attempts, not surgical precise holes in their skin. I needed to ask Dr. Carver about this. I found her in her office, reviewing files with her usual methodical precision. She looked up when I knocked, her steel gray hair perfectly arranged despite the late hour. Dr. Carver, I have a question about the Nathan Cole case. Her pen paused mid-signature. What kind of question? There's a small puncture wound behind his left ear. It's not documented anywhere in the initial report. Or Lucas. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Your job is preparation, not investigation. Mr. Cole died of cardiac arrest. The wound you're referring to was likely from a medical intervention at the hospital. Foreplacement, perhaps. I'd seen thousands of foresights. This wasn't one of them. But it doesn't look like Lucas. She set her pen down with deliberate care. I appreciate your thoroughness, but questioning the coroner's findings isn't part of your responsibilities. Please complete the preparation and move on to the next case. The dismissal stung, but I knew better than to push further. Dr. Carver had built her reputation on precision and protocol. She didn't tolerate speculation. During my lunch break, I sat in the empty cafeteria with my sandwich and laptop. The vending machine hummed in the corner, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the night cleaning crew working their way through the administrative floors. I typed Nathan Cole into the search engine, feeling slightly guilty for investigating a dead man's life. But I had to know. Nathan Cole, 34 years old, worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown. Married, no children. According to his LinkedIn profile, he ran marathons. His last post, just 3 days before his death, showed him crossing the finish line at a local 1OK race, grinning at the camera with a finisher's medal around his neck. This was not a man who died of heart problems. I scrolled through his social media, pictures of hiking trips, healthy meals, gym check-ins. His wife's Facebook page was filled with photos of their active lifestyle, rock climbing, cycling, weekend adventures. No mention of any health concerns. Something cold settled in my stomach. I closed the laptop and walked back to the morgue, past the empty corridors and through the heavy doors that separated the living from the dead. The familiar chemical smell of formaldehyde and disinfectant should have been comforting, but tonight it made me nauseous. The filing cabinets lined one wall of the preparation room. I'd organized these files myself, knew exactly where everything should be. I pulled the drawer for the previous week's cases and started flipping through the folders. Margaret Torres, 68, stroke. James Mitchell, 45, motorcycle. Accident. Linda Patterson, 52, drug overdose. And then I found them. 2 more files. 2 more supposed natural deaths. 2 more healthy adults with no obvious cause of death. I pulled both files and carried them to my workstation. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across the documents as I spread them out. Daniel Rodriguez, 29, gym instructor. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. No previous heart conditions noted in his medical history. Sarah Kim, 31, elementary school teacher. Cause of death, stroke. No history of high blood pressure, no blood clots, no obvious risk factors. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone and took pictures of both files. 3 healthy people, all dead within 2 weeks, all from sudden cardiac events or strokes, all around the same age as Nathan Cole. Walked back to the cold storage area where Nathan's body waited for tomorrow's autopsy. The metal door opened with a soft hiss, releasing a cloud of refrigerated air. I pulled out the drawer and examined his body under the bright examination light. There it was again. That precise, tiny wound behind his left ear. I grabbed a magnifying glass and looked closer. The edges were clean, almost surgical. This wasn't from any medical intervention I'd ever seen. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Hope you're staying warm at work. See you Sunday for dinner. I stared at the message, at this normal piece of life intruding on the growing horror in my mind. 3 dead people. 3 unexplained wounds. 3 families who would never get real answers. But I was going to find them. 2 weeks passed, and I started keeping a private journal. Not in any official capacity, just a small notebook I carried in my jacket pocket, documenting every case that came through our facility. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Body after body arrived with the same mysterious puncture wounds. Always behind the left ear. Always on people between 25 and 40. Always ruled natural deaths, despite their perfect health histories. I'd documented 7 cases now. 7 people who should have lived decades longer. Marcus Chun, 28, personal trainer. Cardiac arrest. Amanda Foster, 33, nurse. Stroke. Kevin Walsh, 36, software engineer. Heart failure. Jennifer Lopez, 27, marketing coordinator. Cardiac arrest. Robert Kim, 39, high school coach. Sudden death syndrome. Lisa Park, 31, veterinarian. Heart attack. And now, as I prepared the latest arrival, I added number 8 to my list. Michael Torres, 34, physical therapist. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. The puncture wound was identical to all the others. I photographed each case with my phone, being careful to document the wound location and the surrounding tissue. The images filled an encrypted folder on my device that I'd labeled Maintenance Records, just in case anyone ever asked to see my phone. But it was more than just the wounds now. I'd started noticing other patterns. All the victims had been athletes or worked in physically demanding jobs. All were in perfect health according to their medical records. And all had died within hours of their last known location, usually their home or workplace. No one died in hospitals. No one had time to call for help. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I tried accessing the digital autopsy reports to see if Dr. Carver had noted the puncture wounds in her official findings. But when I logged into the system, a message flashed across my screen. Insufficient access privileges. That was new. I'd had full access to the database for 3 years. I used it daily to cross-reference cases and update preparation notes. Now, suddenly, I could only view basic intake information. Someone had downgraded my security clearance. The realization hit me like ice water. Dr. Carver knew I'd been asking questions. I spent the rest of my shift in a state of paranoid awareness, jumping at every sound, watching for any sign that someone was monitoring my activities. The morgue felt different now, less like a place of respectful rest and more like a crime scene. At 11:30, I heard voices coming from Dr. Carver's office. She rarely stayed this late, and she never took calls at this hour. I crept closer, to the hallway, staying in the shadows between the fluorescent lights. The shipment schedule needs to be moved up. Dr. Carver's voice was low, urgent. I understand the timeline, but we can't rush this process. The documentation has to be perfect, or will attract attention. A pause. Someone was speaking on the other end of the phone call. No, the technician hasn't been a problem. He's thorough, but he follows protocol. He won't ask questions if we maintain the proper procedures. My blood went cold. They were talking about me. The next batch is scheduled for Thursday. 3 subjects, all prepared according to the specifications. Payment should be processed by Friday morning. Subjects, not patients. Not victims. Subjects. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to become invisible as Dr. Carver's voice continued. The research value is significant. These aren't random cases. Each subject was selected based on specific criteria: age, health status, physical condition. The data we're collecting will be invaluable. Research. They were conducting research on dead people, on murdered people, because that's what this was. I realized with crystal clarity. These weren't natural deaths. These were murders disguised as medical research, and Dr. Carver was part of it. I'll have the final reports ready for pickup on Saturday. The usual location. The call ended, and I heard Dr. Carver's chair creak as she stood up. I moved quickly but quietly back toward the preparation room, my heart hammering so loud I was sure she could hear it echoing through the empty corridors. When I reached my workstation, I grabbed my notebook and started writing everything I'd heard. Every word, every pause, every detail I could remember. 3 subjects scheduled for Thursday. Payment processed. Friday morning. Final reports ready Saturday. This wasn't just about covering up deaths anymore. This was an active operation, and Thursday was only 2 days away. I had to find out who the next victims were going to be, and somehow I had to stop it. The weight of what I'd discovered pressed down on me like a physical force. 8 people were already dead, and at least 3 more were scheduled to join them. I looked around the morgue, the place that had been my sanctuary for 3 years, and realized I was surrounded by evidence of an ongoing murder conspiracy, but I was the only one who could see it. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those puncture wounds, heard Dr. Carver's voice talking about subjects and shipment schedules. By Wednesday morning, I was running on coffee and pure adrenaline. There was only one person at the morgue I trusted: Owen Pratt, the night security guard. He was in his 50s. A former police officer who'd taken the security job after a back injury forced him into early retirement. Owen had always been friendly, and more importantly, he paid attention to everything that happened in the building. I'd found him in the security office around midnight, reviewing the previous day's logs. "Owen, can I ask you something?" He looked up from his paperwork, noting my expression. "You look like hell, Lucas. Everything okay? Have you noticed anything unusual happening here lately? People coming and going at strange hours?" Owen set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Funny you should ask. Yeah, I've noticed some things." My pulse quickened. "What kind of things?" "Well, for starters, Dr. Carver's been having a lot of late-night meetings. Important-looking people in expensive cars. They don't sign in through the main desk. They use the service entrance. How often? Every few weeks. Always on weekends. Always after 11 p.m. Owen rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "And they're not hospital administration. I've been doing security here for 2 years, and I know all the regular staff. These are outsiders. Do you know what they're here for?" Owen glanced around the empty security office, then lowered his voice. "Lucas, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Are you in some kind of trouble?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" The previous morgue tech, Tommy Martinez, he quit suddenly about 6 months ago, right around the time these late-night meetings started. Didn't give 2 weeks' notice, didn't finish his cases. Just cleaned out his locker one day and disappeared. Did he say why? That's the thing. Tommy was a talker. Guy would chat about everything from baseball to his kids' school projects. But when he left, he wouldn't say a word about why. Just told me to be careful and keep my head down. A chill ran down my spine. Be careful of what? Owen studied my face carefully. I think you already know, don't you? That's why you're asking these questions. I wanted to tell him everything. About the puncture wounds, about the pattern of deaths, about the phone conversation I'd overheard. But involving Owen would put him in danger, and he had a family to think about. I'm just noticing some inconsistencies in the cases we're processing. Lucas, Owen's voice became serious. Whatever you're thinking about doing, be smart about it. People who ask too many questions around here tend to disappear. What do you mean, disappear? I mean, they find better opportunities elsewhere. New jobs, new cities, new lives, usually very quickly. The implication was clear. Dr. Carver and her associates had ways of dealing with problems. I thanked Owen and went back to work, but his words echoed in my mind. Tommy Martinez had discovered something and been forced to run. Now I was walking. The same path. Thursday came faster than I expected. I arrived at work early, determined to watch for any sign of the 3 subjects Dr. Carver had mentioned on the phone. The first unusual arrival came at 3 p.m., an ambulance from a private medical service I'd never seen before. No sirens, no emergency lights. They wheeled in a body bag and left without the usual paperwork shuffle that accompanied most deliveries. The intake sheet was minimal. John Doe, age approximately 35, cardiac arrest. But I'd learned not to trust the intake sheets. When I processed the body, I found exactly what I expected. Healthy male, perfect physical condition, tiny puncture wound behind the left ear. This wasn't John Doe. This was victim number 9. 2 more bodies arrived before my shift ended. Both from the same private medical service. Both listed as cardiac arrests. Both with the identical puncture wounds. I documented everything, but I knew my photos and notes wouldn't be enough. I needed more than circumstantial evidence. I needed to understand the full scope of the operation. That evening, I tried calling Owen to ask about the late-night deliveries, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Friday morning, I arrived to find Owen's desk cleaned out. His coffee mug was gone. His family photos had disappeared. Even his backup reading glasses were missing. I found Dr. Carver in her office. Where's Owen? She looked up from her computer screen with practiced calm. Mr. Pratt decided to relocate. Family opportunity out of state. He left yesterday evening. He didn't mention anything about relocating to me. It was a sudden decision. Sometimes opportunities arise that can't be delayed. The way she said opportunities made my skin crawl. Did he leave a forwarding address? I'd like to say goodbye. I'm sure he'll be in touch if he wants to maintain contact. But we both knew he wouldn't be. Owen was gone. Tommy Martinez was gone. Anyone who got too close to the truth found themselves with sudden opportunities elsewhere. I was completely alone now. And Dr. Carver knew it. As I walked back to the preparation room, I realized the game had changed. This wasn't just about documenting evidence anymore. This was about survival, and I was running out of time to decide what to do next. Saturday night, I made the decision that would either save my life or end it. Dr. Carver rarely worked weekends, and with Owen gone, there was no night security guard. The building would be empty except for the occasional maintenance check. It was the perfect opportunity to investigate areas of the morgue I'd never been able to access. I arrived at 11 p.m. using my key card, half expecting it to be deactivated. But the lock clicked open, and I stepped into the familiar chemical-scented darkness. The morgue felt different when empty. Every footstep echoed. Every shadow seemed to move. I'd spent 3 years working these halls, But tonight, they felt alien and threatening. I started with the obvious places: Dr. Carver's office, the storage rooms, the administrative areas. But everything was locked down tight, and my reduced security clearance meant my key card wouldn't open most doors. Then I remembered something Owen had mentioned months ago about how the building's layout included several areas that weren't on the official floor plans. Spaces created when they'd renovated the older sections of the hospital. The morgue's industrial freezer units were massive, built into what used to be the hospital's basement storage area. I'd never paid much attention to the space behind them, assuming it was just structural support. But as I examined the area more carefully with my flashlight, I noticed something odd. There was a gap between the back wall and the leftmost freezer unit, barely visible unless you were looking for it. I squeezed through the narrow space, my jacket catching on the freezer's cooling coils. Behind the unit was a small alcove, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, completely hidden from normal view, and it was full of files, dozens of manila. Folders were stacked in metal filing cabinets that definitely weren't part of the morgue's official equipment. I pulled out my phone and activated the flashlight, illuminating what looked like a secret archive. The first file I opened made my hands shake. Marcus Chun, personal trainer, age 28. But this wasn't the official file I'd seen before. This version contained pages of additional information: medical history, psychological profile, financial records, insurance policy details. And at the bottom, a payment receipt for $75,000, dated 3 days after his death. I grabbed another file. Amanda Foster, the nurse. Same format, detailed background information, personal data, and a payment receipt for $125. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echoing off the concrete walls. I started pulling files randomly, photographing everything I could. Kevin Walsh, $200,000. Jennifer Lopez, $90,000. Robert Kim, $150,000. Every single victim had a corresponding payment, ranging from $75,000 to $300,000. The money wasn't going to Dr. Carver. The receipts showed payments to something called Meridian Biologics. I'd never heard of Meridian Biologics. But the most chilling discovery was still to come. At the bottom of one filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled Scheduled Acquisitions. Inside were profiles for people who weren't dead yet. Mason Calloway, age 38, investment banker. Appointment scheduled for Tuesday, November 15th. Rebecca Stone, age 31, physical therapist. Appointment scheduled for Thursday, November 17th. David Kim, age 35, architect. Appointment scheduled for Saturday, November 19th. Today was November 12th. Mason Calloway had less than 3 days to live. The profiles contained everything: home addresses, work schedules, daily routines, family information. Someone had been stalking these people, learning their habits, preparing for their murders. But why? What was Meridian Biologics paying for? I found the answer in a separate folder marked Research Protocols. The documents inside were dense with medical terminology, but the basic concept was horrifyingly clear. Meridian Biologics was conducting unauthorized drug trials, testing experimental compounds on unwilling human subjects. The puncture wounds weren't just injection sites. They were the delivery method for lethal doses of experimental drugs. The victims weren't random. They were specifically selected based on age, health status, and physical condition to provide optimal research data. Their deaths were documented and analyzed to determine the effectiveness of various drug compounds. It was medical research disguised as murder for hire. And according to the next scheduled payment receipt, Mason Calloway was worth $500,000 to whoever was paying for his death. I photographed everything I could, my phone's storage filling up with evidence of the most elaborate murder conspiracy I could have imagined. 27 people were already dead, and at least 3 more were scheduled to die within the next week. as I prepared to leave the hidden archive, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Footsteps. Someone else was in the building. I quickly turned off my phone's flashlight and pressed myself against the filing cabinets, trying to become invisible in the cramped space behind the freezer units. The footsteps were getting closer, moving through the main morgue area with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Dr. Carver's voice echoed through the empty corridors. "I told you, the files are secure. No one has access to that area." She was talking to someone either on the phone or with a companion I couldn't see. "The next delivery is scheduled for Tuesday morning. Payment will be processed within 24 hours of confirmation." I held my breath as the footsteps moved closer to the freezer area. If she decided to check the hidden archive, I was trapped. But after several agonizing minutes, the voices faded as they moved toward Dr. Carver's office. I waited another 10 minutes before carefully extracting myself from the hiding space. My legs were cramped, my clothes were covered in dust, but I had what I needed: evidence, real, documented proof of a murder operation that had been running for months. The question now was what to do with it. I didn't sleep at all Saturday night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those payment receipts. $75,000, $125,000, $500,000. 27 people murdered for money. Disguised as medical research. By Sunday morning, I had uploaded all the photos to an encrypted cloud storage account and started researching Meridian Biologics from my apartment. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Meridian Biologics presented itself as a legitimate pharmaceutical research company specializing in cardiac medications and neurological treatments. Their corporate website was professional, complete with stock photos of smiling scientists and testimonials from satisfied research partners. But when I dug deeper, the facade started cracking. The company had been founded only 18 months ago, right around the time the murders started. Their listed address was a small office building in the medical district, shared with dozens of other businesses. No manufacturing facilities, no research laboratories, no published studies or FDA approvals. For a company supposedly conducting cutting-edge medical research, Meridian Biologics had remarkably little actual presence. I found their business registration documents through the Secretary of State's website. The founding partners were listed as Dr. Rachel Donnelly and someone named Grant Holloway. A quick search revealed that Dr. Donnelly had previously worked for several major pharmaceutical companies before being terminated for ethical violations 2 years ago. Grant Holloway was harder to track down. No LinkedIn profile, no professional history I could find. But eventually, I discovered a news article from 3 years ago about a medical equipment fraud case. Grant Holloway had been charged with selling counterfeit medical devices to hospitals, but the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. These weren't legitimate researchers. They were criminals who had figured out how to monetize murder. I spent hours searching through FDA databases, looking for any record of Meridian Biologics conducting approved clinical trials. Nothing. No registered studies. No safety protocols. No oversight whatsoever. But I did find something else. A pattern of FDA violations and warnings sent to companies that had previously employed Dr. Rachel Donnelly. Unauthorized drug testing. Falsified research data. Human subjects experimentation without proper consent. The woman had been conducting illegal medical research for years, moving from company to company whenever her activities were discovered. Meridian Biologics was just her latest front operation. Printed out everything I could find and spread the documents across my dining table. Bank records, corporate filings, FDA violations, news articles about Dr. Donnelly's previous terminations. The picture that emerged was terrifying in its scope. Meridian Biologics wasn't just killing people for money. They were conducting systematic human experimentation, using murder victims as unwilling test subjects for experimental drugs. The payment receipts represented fees for providing fresh human subjects for research that would never be approved through legitimate channels. Someone was paying them $500,000 to kill Mason Calloway and use his body for illegal drug testing. But who? And why these specific people? I examined the victim profiles again, looking for connections I might have missed. All young adults, all in perfect health, all with jobs requiring physical fitness. And then I noticed something else. Every single victim had recently increased their life insurance coverage. Marcus Chun had doubled his policy 3 months before his death. Amanda Foster had added a $200,000 rider 6 weeks before she died. Kevin Walsh had purchased a new $500,000 policy just 2 months ago. This wasn't random selection. Someone was identifying people with large life insurance policies and having them killed. My phone rang, startling me out of my research. The caller ID showed my sister's number. "Hey, Emma." "Lucas, you sound terrible. Are you getting sick?" "Just tired. Working a lot of overtime lately." "Well, don't forget about dinner tonight. Mom's making your favorite Sunday dinner with my family." A normal, innocent tradition that felt surreal after spending the day researching a murder conspiracy. "I'll be there." "Good. And Lucas?" "Mom's been worried about you. She says you seem stressed lately." Even my family was noticing the change in me. The weight of what I'd discovered was affecting everything. After we hung up, I stared at the evidence spread across my table. 27 people were dead. At least 3 more were scheduled to die this week. And I was the only person who knew the truth. But knowing the truth and proving it were 2 different things. I needed more than circumstantial evidence and hidden files. I needed to understand how the operation worked, who was paying for the murders, and how they were selecting their victims. Most importantly, I needed to find a way to save Mason Calloway before Tuesday morning dot, because if I couldn't stop what was going to happen to him, I'd be partially responsible for his death. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Mason Calloway had less than 24 hours to live, and I still didn't know how to save him. I arrived at work early, hoping to find some clue about how Meridian Biologics operated. But when I walked into the morgue, I discovered something that made my stomach drop. There was already a new body waiting for processing. The intake sheet read, Sarah Whitcomb, age 29, elementary school teacher, cause of death, cardiac arrest. But Sarah Whitcomb wasn't supposed to die until Thursday. According to the files I'd found, Rebecca Stone was scheduled for Thursday. Sarah wasn't even on the list, unless they were accelerating the timeline. I processed Sarah's body with shaking hands, already knowing what I would find. The puncture wound was there, identical to all the others. But this time, I noticed something else. The injection site was still slightly inflamed, suggesting she had died very recently. Within the last few hours, I checked the timestamp on the intake form. Sarah Whitcomb's body had been delivered at 6:30 a.m., barely 2 hours before I arrived. The medical service was listed as Emergency Transport Solutions. Another company I'd never heard of. Dr. Carver peered in the doorway as I was photographing the wound. "Lucas," I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. "Dr. Carver, we need to talk." Her tone was ice cold. She gestured toward her office, and I followed with growing dread. Dr. Carver closed the door behind us and sat down across from her desk. For a long moment, she studied my face with the analytical precision she usually reserved for autopsy reports. "You've been asking a lot of questions lately. I'm just trying to do my job thoroughly. Your job is preparation and documentation, not investigation. I understand that, but do you?" She leaned forward. "Because your recent behavior suggests otherwise. You've been accessing files outside your clearance level. You've been photographing bodies without authorization. You've been conducting internet research on our cases." My blood went cold. She knew. Somehow she knew everything. I don't know what you mean, Lucas. Her voice was patient, almost motherly. I've been doing this work for 15 years. I can spot curiosity from a mile away. And curiosity, while admirable in many circumstances, can be dangerous in others. Dangerous how? Dangerous to your career. Dangerous to your family's financial security. Dangerous to people you care about. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Dr. Carver knew about my sister's medical school loans. She knew about my mother's mortgage. She knew exactly how to hurt me without laying a finger on me. I'm not trying to cause problems. I know you're not. You're a good employee, Lucas. Reliable, discreet. That's why I'm having this conversation with you instead of simply arranging for your transfer. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were several official-looking documents. Northern Regional Medical Center has an opening for a morgue technician. Better pay, better benefits, opportunities for advancement. They've agreed to hire you immediately, no questions asked. The transfer application was already filled out with my information. All it needed was my signature. This is a generous offer, Dr. Carver continued. It would allow you to continue your career without any complications from your current position. What if I don't want to transfer? Her smile was cold as winter. Then we would need to address some concerning performance issues that have come to my attention. Unauthorized access to restricted areas. Misuse of company equipment for personal research. Violation of patient confidentiality protocols. She had documentation for all of it. Somehow, she'd been monitoring my activities without me knowing it. These violations would likely result in termination and could affect your ability to find similar employment elsewhere. They might also trigger investigations into your personal conduct that could be embarrassing for your family. The message was clear. Sign the transfer papers and disappear, or be destroyed professionally and personally. I need time to think about it. Of course, take until tomorrow morning. But Lucas? She stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. Some opportunities don't wait for indecision. And some problems don't go away just because we ignore them. I walked back to the preparation room in a daze. Dr. Carver had just given me an ultimatum. Leave quietly or be destroyed. But she didn't know that I'd already discovered the hidden files, that I understood the full scope of the murder operation. She thought I was just a curious employee who'd stumbled onto something he didn't understand, but I understood everything. And I knew that Mason Calloway was going to die tomorrow, unless I found a way to stop it. The question was whether I was brave enough to risk everything to save a man. I'd never met Dot. As I stared at Sarah Whitcomb's body, I realized I didn't have a choice. 28 people were already dead because no one had been willing to take that risk. I couldn't let Mason Calloway become number 20-9, even if it meant sacrificing my career, my family's security, and possibly my life. I spent Monday evening staring at Dr. Carver's transfer papers, trying to convince myself that running away was the smart choice. My sister needed me to keep my job so I could help with her medical school loans. My mother depended on my financial support for her mortgage payments, but every time I picked up the pen to sign the documents, I saw Sarah Whitcomb's face, 29 years old, an elementary school teacher who would never see another classroom full of children. And tomorrow, Mason Calloway would join her. I made my decision at 2 a.m. Instead of signing the transfer papers. I started researching Mason Calloway. If I was going to save his life, I needed to understand how Meridian Biologics planned to kill him. His LinkedIn profile showed he worked as an investment banker for Hartwell and Associates downtown. Married to Jennifer Calloway, a real estate agent. No children, but plenty of photos of an active lifestyle, skiing trips, marathon runs, charity fundraisers. His work address was public information. His daily routine would be predictable, But how was Meridian Biologics planning to get close enough to inject him with their experimental drug? I found my answer in the most unlikely place. His wife's social media account. Jennifer Calloway had posted about Mason's upcoming appointment for a comprehensive health screening at something called the Metropolitan Wellness Institute. The appointment was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. I'd never heard of the Metropolitan Wellness Institute. A quick online search revealed it was a private medical facility that specialized in executive health assessments for busy professionals, comprehensive physical exams, cardiac stress tests, preventive screenings, all the services that health-conscious professionals like Mason would find appealing. But when I looked deeper into the company's background, I found troubling connections. The Metropolitan Wellness Institute had been founded 6 months ago by Dr. Rachel Donnelly, the same Dr. Rachel Donnelly who co-founded Meridian Biologics. Mason Calloway wasn't going to a legitimate medical appointment. He was walking into a trap designed specifically to kill him. I tried calling the number listed on the Metropolitan Wellness Institute's website, but it went straight to voicemail. The address was listed as being in the medical district, just a few blocks from the morgue. At 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called in sick to work and drove to the medical district. The Metropolitan Wellness Institute was located in a converted office building that looked professional enough from the outside. Clean glass windows, modern signage, a small parking lot with space for maybe 20 cars. But when I walked up to the main entrance, I noticed something odd. The lobby was empty except for a single receptionist, and there were no other patients waiting for appointments. For a medical facility that claimed to serve busy executives, it was remarkably quiet. I sat in my car across the street and waited. At 9:45 a.m., a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. A man in his late 30s got out, tall, athletic build, carrying a small gym bag. He matched the photos I'd seen of Mason Calloway. He was 15 minutes early for his death appointment. Watched him walk into the building with the confidence of someone who believed he was taking care of his health. He had no idea that he would never walk out. My phone rang. Dr. Carver's number appeared on the screen. "Lucas, you're not at work today." I called in sick. Interesting timing. "We have your transfer papers ready for signature." "I'm not signing them." A long pause. "That's unfortunate for everyone involved." "Dr. Carver, I know about Meridian Biologics. I know about the murders. I know about Mason Calloway." Another pause, longer this time. "Lucas, you're clearly unwell. Stress can cause people to develop paranoid delusions. I think you should consider seeking professional help. I have evidence, photos of the files, documentation of the payments. I know everything. What you have is a collection of materials taken without authorization from a secure area. Materials that could be interpreted in many different ways by someone who doesn't understand the complexities of medical research." "Medical research? You're killing people. Lucas." Her voice became sharp. "You're making very serious allegations based on incomplete information. Allegations that could destroy innocent people's careers and reputations. Are you prepared for the legal consequences of such accusations?" The threat was clear. If I went public with my evidence, I would face lawsuits, criminal charges, and personal destruction. But as we spoke, Mason Calloway was inside that building, probably being prepared for his comprehensive health screening. In a few minutes, Dr. Rachel Donnelly would inject him with an experimental drug that would stop his heart. I'm prepared for whatever consequences come from telling the truth. The truth? Dr. Carver's laugh was cold. The truth is that you're a delusional employee who broke into restricted areas and stole confidential documents. The truth is that you've been stalking innocent people and making threatening phone calls. The truth is that you're mentally unstable and dangerous. As she spoke, I realized she'd been planning this conversation. Every word was calculated to establish a record of my supposed mental breakdown. You can't cover this up forever. Lucas, by the time you understand what you've gotten yourself into, it will be too late to change course. I suggest you reconsider your options while you still have some. The call ended. I stared at the Metropolitan Wellness Institute, knowing that Mason Calloway was inside being murdered, while I sat helplessly in my car. In a few hours, his body would arrive at the morgue with the familiar puncture wound behind his ear, and I would be forced to process him like all the others, unless I found the courage to do something about it. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? I stared at the Metropolitan Wellness Institute building, watching the windows for any sign of movement. Mason Calloway had been inside for 20 minutes. I need to report a murder in progress. Sir, what's your location? I gave the dispatcher the address, but as I started explaining about the fake medical facility and the experimental drug injections, I could hear the skepticism in her voice. Sir, are you reporting an actual crime you're witnessing, or are you making allegations about suspected criminal activity? I'm reporting a murder that's happening right now. A man named Mason Calloway is being killed inside that building. Have you witnessed someone being harmed? Not directly, but I have evidence that... Sir, I'm going to transfer you to our non-emergency line so you can speak with a detective about your concerns. Before I could protest, the call was transferred. I found myself on hold, listening to recorded messages about reporting suspicious activity while Mason Calloway was dying 50 yards away. When a detective finally picked up, I tried again. Detective Morrison, I understand you have information about suspected criminal activity. My name is Lucas Harrow. I work at County Memorial Morgue, and I've discovered evidence of a murder conspiracy involving fake medical research. Mr. Harrow, have you reported this to your supervisor? My supervisor is part of the conspiracy. I could practically hear Detective Morrison's interest level dropping. I sounded like every other paranoid caller who claimed vast conspiracies involving their workplace. Mr. Harrow, I'd like you to come to the station this afternoon so we can discuss your concerns in detail. Can you be here around 2 p.m.? You don't understand. There's a man being killed right now. If you don't send someone immediately, sir, if you're witnessing an actual crime in progress, you need to call 911. If you have suspicions about criminal activity, we can schedule a time to review your evidence. The call ended with an appointment I knew would be useless. By 2 p.m., Mason Calloway would be dead, and any evidence at the Metropolitan Wellness Institute would be gone. I was completely on my own. 25 minutes had passed since Mason entered the building. How long did it take to inject someone with an experimental drug? How long before the cardiac arrest would begin? I made a desperate decision. I got out of my car and walked across the street to the Metropolitan Wellness Institute. If the police wouldn't listen, maybe I could find another way to help. The lobby was exactly as sterile as it had appeared from outside. A single receptionist sat behind a modern desk, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. It looked like a legitimate medical facility. Can I help you? The receptionist smiled with practiced professionalism. I'd like to schedule a comprehensive health screening. Certainly. Do you have insurance information with you? Actually, I'm paying cash. I heard you offer the same services that Mason Calloway is receiving today? Her smile faltered slightly. I'm sorry, I can't discuss other patients' appointments. Of course, I just meant the comprehensive screening package. How long does that typically take? Usually about 90 minutes for the full assessment. 90 minutes. Mason had been inside for 30 minutes, which meant he had at least an hour left before the appointment would normally end. Is Dr. Donnelly available for consultations today? This time, the receptionist's professional mask slipped completely. How do you know Dr. Donnelly? A colleague recommended her work. Very cutting-edge research. I think there's been some confusion. Dr. Donnelly isn't seeing patients today. But her nervous glance toward the elevator told me exactly where Dr. Donnelly was. "I'll wait," I said, settling into one of the lobby chairs. The receptionist picked up her phone and made a quick call, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear the conversation, but her body language suggested she was reporting my presence to someone upstairs. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Dr. Rachel Donnelly emerged. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested expensive education and professional success. But her eyes were cold, calculating. "Mr. Harrow." She knew my name. "I understand you're interested in our services." "I'm interested in understanding your research. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." She gestured toward a small consultation room off the lobby. I followed, knowing I was walking into a trap, but unable to see any alternative. Dr. Donnelly closed the door and sat across from me at a small table. "You've been asking questions about things you don't understand. I understand that you've been murdering people for money." She smiled. "That's a very dramatic way to describe important medical research. Research on unwilling subjects who end up dead. All medical progress requires sacrifice. The volunteers we work with are contributing to breakthroughs that will save thousands of lives." "Volunteers?" "Mason Calloway doesn't know he's volunteering to die. Mr. Calloway is participating in a study that will advance our understanding of cardiac response to innovative pharmaceutical compounds. His contribution will be invaluable." The clinical language couldn't disguise what she was describing. Mason was being used as a test subject for lethal drug experiments. "How do you select your victims?" "We don't select victims, Mr. Harrow. We identify optimal research subjects based on specific criteria: age, health status, physical condition, lifestyle factors. Each subject provides unique data that helps us refine our compounds." "And the payment receipts? The life insurance policies?" Dr. Donnelly's expression hardened. "The families of our research subjects receive compensation for their loss. It's a standard practice in clinical research. Families who don't know their loved ones were murdered. Families who benefit financially from their loved ones' contribution to medical science." I realized with growing horror that Dr. Donnelly actually believed what she was saying. In her mind, she wasn't committing murder. She was conducting valuable research that happened to require human casualties. "Where's Mason Calloway?" "Mr. Calloway is completing his health assessment. He should be finished within the hour." "Is he still alive?" "For now." She checked her watch. "Though I'm afraid his prognosis isn't good. The preliminary results of his stress test indicate significant cardiac abnormalities." Mason was still alive, but barely, and I was running out of time to save him. "I want to see him," I said. Dr. Donnelly studied my face with the same clinical detachment she probably used when watching her victims die. "That's not possible." "Then I'm calling the police again. And this time, I'm not hanging up until they send someone." "Mr. Harrow, I think you're misunderstanding your situation." She pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. "I have Detective Morrison on speed dial. We've spoken several times about your concerning behavior." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Your obsession with Mason Calloway. Your threats against medical professionals. Your break-ins at the morgue. Detective Morrison is very interested in speaking with you about your stalking activities." She'd been planning this for days, maybe weeks. Every move I'd made had been anticipated and turned against me. "Detective Morrison believes you may be suffering from a psychological break brought on by work-related stress. Morgue technicians sometimes develop unhealthy fixations on the deceased. It's not uncommon." I realized the full scope of what I was up against. This wasn't just Dr. Carver and Dr. Donnelly. They had contacts in law enforcement, enough influence to frame me as a mentally unstable stalker. "How many people are involved in this?" Dr. Donnelly's smile was cold. Enough. We provide a valuable service, Mr. Harrow. Our research advances medical science while solving certain personal problems for our clients. Clients? You mean the people paying to have their relatives killed? I mean people who understand that some situations require creative solutions. Troubled marriages, business partnerships gone bad, inheritance disputes, insurance needs. The full picture finally crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just illegal medical research. It was murder for hire disguised as pharmaceutical testing. The life insurance policies aren't random. Someone's paying you to kill specific people. Our clients identify optimal research subjects who also happen to address their personal concerns. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. You're talking about contract killing. We're talking about advancing medical science while providing estate planning services. Dr. Donnelly's ability to rationalize mass murder was terrifying. But even more terrifying was the realization that she had an entire network supporting her operation. How long has this been going on? We've been conducting research for 18 months, 28 successful studies so far, with several more scheduled for this week. 28. Sarah Whitcomb had been number 28, which meant Mason would be 29 if I couldn't stop it. Who are your clients? That's confidential information. But I can tell you that they represent a diverse cross-section of society. Business leaders, professionals, family members dealing with difficult situations. People who understand that traditional solutions don't always address complex problems. A horrible thought occurred to me. The other victims on your schedule, Rebecca Stone and David Kim, someone's already paid for their deaths? Their research appointments are confirmed. The preliminary work has been completed. Preliminary work? Background, research, lifestyle analysis, medical history review, insurance verification. We're very thorough in our subject selection process. She was describing surveillance and stalking as if it were standard medical protocol. These people had been watching potential victims for weeks or months, learning their habits, planning their murders down to the smallest detail. How do you get them to come in voluntarily? We offer services that appeal to health-conscious professionals. Comprehensive screenings, executive physicals, preventive care assessments. People like Mason Calloway are eager to maintain their physical condition. The Metropolitan Wellness Institute was the perfect front. It attracted exactly the demographic they wanted to kill: young, healthy, successful people with substantial life insurance policies. And Dr. Carver falsifies the death certificates. Dr. Carver ensures that our research results are properly documented. Cardiac arrest, stroke, sudden death syndrome, all perfectly legitimate causes of death for people who participate in strenuous pharmaceutical trials. Trials that are designed to kill them. Trials that test the limits of human cardiac response to innovative compounds. The fact that subjects don't survive is simply data that helps us refine our research. I felt sick. Dr. Donnelly was describing murder as if it were a quality control issue. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from an unknown number. Police en route to your location. Suspect armed. Dangerous. Surrender peacefully. Dr. Donnelly saw my expression change. I told you, Mr. Harrow, we have friends in law enforcement. Detective Morrison is very concerned about your erratic behavior and your threats against medical professionals. Through the consultation room window, I could see police cars pulling into the parking lot. Red and blue lights flashed across the glass. They're here to arrest you for stalking, making terroristic threats, and breaking and entering. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to discuss a different arrangement. What kind of arrangement? You walk away. Transfer to a different facility, as Dr. Carver suggested. Forget everything you think you've discovered. Live your life. And Mason Calloway? Mr. Calloway completes his health assessment. His contribution to medical science helps save lives. His murder helps you make money. His research participation addresses several important needs simultaneously. The police were at the front door now. I could hear voices in the lobby, the receptionist explaining that there was a disturbed individual in the consultation room. I had seconds to decide. Surrender and be arrested for crimes I didn't commit, or find another way to save Mason Calloway's life. Where is he? Mr. Harrow, you're out of options. But I wasn't. Not yet. The consultation room had a second door leading to a hallway I hadn't noticed when I entered. While Dr. Donnelly watched the police officers approach the main entrance, I quietly tried the handle dot. It was unlocked. Dr. Donnelly, one of the officers, called from the lobby. We're here about Lucas Harrow. He's in consultation room 1, she replied. Turning toward the main door, I slipped through the side door into a narrow hallway lined with what looked like legitimate medical examination rooms. At the far end, I could see an elevator and a stairwell marked authorized personnel only. The sound of my footsteps was masked by the commotion in the lobby as the police officers explained my supposed crimes to Dr. Donnelly. I moved quickly toward the elevator, knowing I had maybe 60 seconds before they discovered I was gone. The elevator required a key card, but the stairwell door was propped open. I could hear voices coming from the floor above, medical personnel discussing procedures, equipment being moved around. That's where Mason was. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding from adrenaline and fear. At the second floor, I found myself in a corridor that looked much more like a real medical facility. Clean white walls, proper medical equipment, examination rooms with sophisticated monitoring devices. But it was too quiet, too empty. I moved carefully down the hall, checking each room. Most were unoccupied, but the equipment suggested this was where the actual research took place. Heart monitors, 4 stands, resuscitation equipment. Everything needed to monitor someone's death in real-time dot at the end of the corridor, I found. Him, Mason Calloway, was lying on an examination table in what looked like a cardiac stress test facility. He was conscious, but connected to multiple monitoring devices. EKG leads on his chest, blood pressure cuff on his arm, IV line in his hand. A technician in scrubs was adjusting something on one of the monitors, but she looked up when I entered. Excuse. This is a restricted area. I'm here about Mr. Calloway's insurance authorization, I said, hoping to buy time. I'll need to verify that with Dr. Donnelly. She reached for a phone on the wall, but I moved closer to Mason's bedside. How are you feeling? I asked him. Mason looked groggy but alert. Tired. They said the stress test medication might make me drowsy. Stress test medication. They'd already started the process. What exactly did they give you? Some kind of cardiac stimulant to test how my heart responds under pressure. I looked at the 4 bag hanging above his bed. Clear fluid, but I had no way of knowing what was actually in it. The technician was speaking quietly into the phone, probably alerting Dr. Donnelly that someone was interfering with the procedure. Mason, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're in danger. What? His voice was slurred, suggesting whatever they'd given him was affecting his cognition. This isn't a legitimate medical facility. They're going to kill you. The technician hung up the phone and moved toward an emergency button on the wall. Sir, you need to leave immediately, or I'm calling security. Mason, can you stand up? He tried to sit up, but seemed disoriented. I don't. What's happening? They've drugged you. We need to get you out of here. I started disconnecting the monitoring leads from his chest, setting off alarms on the cardiac monitors. The technician hit the emergency button, and immediately I could hear footsteps running down the corridor. Mason, we have to go now. I helped him swing his legs off the examination table, but he was unsteady on his feet. Whatever they'd given him was affecting his balance and coordination. I don't understand. Dr. Donnelly said this was routine. Dr. Donnelly is trying to murder you for your life insurance money." The door burst open, and 2 security guards rushed in, followed by Dr. Donnelly herself. "Mr. Harrow, step away from the patient. His name is Mason Calloway, and he's not a patient. He's a victim. Mr. Calloway is participating in a cardiac research study. You're interfering with a legitimate medical procedure. Call 911, I told Mason. Tell them you're being held against your will." But Mason was too disoriented to understand what was happening. The drugs in his system were making it impossible for him to process the situation. "Mr. Harrow," Dr. Donnelly continued, "you're having a psychological episode. These security officers are going to escort you to the lobby, where the police are waiting to help you. Mason, look at me. Do you remember signing any consent forms for experimental drug testing?" He blinked slowly, trying to focus. I signed papers for the physical exam." "Did anyone explain that you were volunteering for potentially lethal drug trials? Lethal?" The word seemed to penetrate the fog in his mind. "What do you mean, lethal?" Dr. Donnelly gestured to the security guards. "Remove him, now." But as they moved toward me, Mason grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Wait. What's in the 4? "Experimental cardiac stimulants designed to cause heart failure," I said quickly. 28 other people have died from the same injections." Mason looked at the 4 line in his hand, then at Dr. Donnelly. "Is that true?" "Mr. Calloway, you're experiencing medication-related confusion. This gentleman is mentally ill and making false accusations." But doubt was beginning to show in Mason's eyes. Even through the drug-induced haze, he was starting to understand that something was wrong. "Take out the 4, I told him. "Mr. Calloway, removing the IV could cause dangerous complications," Dr. Donnelly warned. "More dangerous than experimental drugs designed to kill me?" Mason pulled the IV line out of his hand, blood dripping onto the floor. The cardiac monitors were still beeping wildly from the disconnected leads. Alarms were sounding throughout the facility. And somewhere downstairs, police officers were looking for me on false charges. But Mason Calloway was alive and starting to understand what had almost happened to him. "We need to get out of here," I said. "Where can we go?" "The police are downstairs." I looked around the examination room, trying to find another exit. There was a window, but we were on the 2nd floor. "The fire escape," Mason said, pointing to a red exit sign at the end of the corridor. We ran. The fire escape led to an alley behind the Metropolitan Wellness Institute building. Mason was still unsteady from whatever drugs they'd given him, but the adrenaline was helping him stay focused. "My car," he said, pointing to the black sedan in the parking lot. "We can't go back there. The police are watching the front entrance. Then how do we get help?" It was a good question. The police had been told I was a mentally unstable stalker. Dr. Donnelly had contacts in law enforcement. Who would support her version of events? And we had no evidence except my word against an entire conspiracy. "We need proof," I said. "Real evidence that can't be dismissed or explained away." "What kind of evidence?" I thought about the hidden files in the morgue, the payment receipts, the documentation of 28 murders. But all of that could be dismissed as circumstantial or misinterpreted. We need to document what they're doing. Record them admitting to the murders. Mason leaned against the brick wall, still fighting the effects of the drugs. "You want to go back in there?" "Not back in. But I know where they keep their records." I told Mason about the warehouse facility I'd seen, mentioned in some of the Meridian Biologics paperwork. It was listed as their research facility, probably where they stored evidence, conducted the actual experiments, and disposed of bodies that couldn't be sent to the morgue. "You think we can find proof there?" "I think that's where they take people when the fake medical appointment doesn't work." We made our way to Mason's car, staying in the alley until we could approach from the opposite side of the building. The police were still inside, Probably searching for me while Dr. Donnelly explained how I'd attacked her patient. Mason's hands were shaking as he started the engine. I still can't believe this is real. I thought I was just getting a physical exam. How did you hear about the Metropolitan Wellness Institute? My wife found them online. She said they specialized in preventive care for executives. His voice trailed off as the implications hit him. Jennifer set up the appointment. The cold reality settled over both of us. Mason's wife had arranged for him to be murdered. The life insurance policy, I said. Did Jennifer encourage you to increase your coverage recently? Mason nodded slowly. 6 months ago. She said we needed more protection now that we're trying to start a family. How much coverage? $2 million. Dr. Donnelly had mentioned that Mason was worth $500,000 to Meridian Biologics. The other $1.5 million would go to Jennifer Calloway, minus whatever she paid to have her husband killed. Mason, I'm sorry, but your wife hired these people to murder you. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. We've been married for 8 years. We were trying to have children. She ... she can't. The money was more important to her than your life. Mason didn't respond, but I could see him processing the betrayal. Everything he'd believed about his marriage, his future, his life had been a lie. We drove to the warehouse district in silence. The address I'd found in the Meridian Biologics files led us to an industrial area filled with legitimate businesses, shipping companies, storage facilities, small manufacturing operations. The Meridian building looked like any other warehouse. From the outside. No signs, no obvious security, nothing to suggest it was anything other than another storage facility. But when we parked across the street and watched for a few minutes, we started seeing activity that didn't match a normal warehouse operation. Medical vehicles coming and going. People in lab coats carrying equipment. Deliveries that required special handling and refrigeration. That's where they're really doing the research, I said. What kind of research? I thought about Dr. Donnelly's clinical descriptions of testing. Cardiac limits and pharmaceutical responses. They're using murder victims as test subjects for experimental drugs, documenting how different compounds affect the human body, selling the data to pharmaceutical companies or research institutions, using dead people, using people they kill specifically for the research, fresh subjects with known medical histories and controlled conditions. Mason stared at the warehouse building. And my wife paid them to make me one of those subjects. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'd rather know the truth. We watched the building for another 20 minutes, documenting the vehicles and personnel we could see, but we needed more than surveillance footage to prove what was happening inside. There, Mason pointed to a delivery van pulling up to a side entrance. Medical supplies. The van was unmarked, but the driver and passenger were wearing scrubs and handling equipment that looked like it belonged in an operating room or laboratory. They're setting up for another procedure, I said. Another murder. Rebecca Stone or David Kim. Maybe both. As we watched, more vehicles arrived. A refrigerated truck. A van that could have been transporting a person. Medical personnel who moved with the efficiency of people conducting routine procedures. We need to call someone, Mason said. FBI, state police, someone who isn't connected to the local department. And tell them what? That we suspect a warehouse is being used for illegal medical research? They'll want evidence. Then let's get evidence. Mason was looking at me with a determination I hadn't expected from someone who'd nearly been murdered an hour earlier. That's extremely dangerous. If they catch us... Lucas, these people tried to kill me. They murdered 28 other people, and they're planning to kill more. He was right. But I also knew that approaching the warehouse would likely be suicidal. Dr. Donnelly and her associates had demonstrated they were willing to kill anyone who threatened their operation. There might be another way, I said. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Blake Whitaker, an investigative journalist who'd done several stories about medical fraud and pharmaceutical industry corruption. Blake had the resources and connections to investigate Meridian Biologics properly. More importantly, he had the credibility to make people listen when he reported what we discovered. Blake Whitaker, Channel 7 Investigations. Blake, this is Lucas Harrow. I have a story for you that's going to change everything. Blake Whitaker arrived at our meeting location within an hour, carrying professional camera equipment and a skeptical expression. We'd chosen a 24-hour diner far from the medical district, somewhere public enough to feel safe, but private enough to talk freely. "Let me get this straight," Blake said after I'd explained everything. "You're alleging that a morgue supervisor and a fake medical research company are running a murder-for-hire operation disguised as pharmaceutical testing." "That's exactly what I'm alleging." Blake looked at Mason, who was still pale and shaky. "From his experience at the Metropolitan Wellness Institute, and you were nearly killed by these people?" "They drugged me and were preparing to inject me with something that would have stopped my heart," Mason confirmed. "My wife paid them to do it for the life insurance money." Blake pulled out a digital recorder and set it on the table between us. "I need to document everything you're telling me. But I have to warn you, allegations this serious require extraordinary evidence. I have evidence." I showed him the photos I'd taken of the hidden files. Payment receipts, victim profiles, research documentation. Everything proving that Meridian Biologics has killed 28 people in the past 18 months. Blake examined the photos carefully, zooming in on the payment amounts and victim information. His expression grew more serious as he reviewed the documentation. "This is substantial, but you obtained these files through unauthorized access to a secure area. That could compromise their legal admissibility. What about Mason's testimony? He's a living witness to an attempted murder. Dr. Donnelly will claim he misunderstood a legitimate medical procedure. His wife will say she arranged a routine physical exam without corroborating evidence." Blake was right. We needed more than circumstantial evidence and one person's testimony. "What would convince you?" I asked. "Leave documentation of them committing crimes. Video evidence of them administering lethal injections, recorded confessions. Something that can't be explained away or dismissed." I thought about the warehouse facility and the activity we'd observed. They're conducting another procedure tonight, probably killing Rebecca Stone or David Kim. "You want to film a murder in progress?" "I want to film evidence of murder being committed, save lives while documenting the crimes." Blake considered this carefully. "It's incredibly dangerous. If they discover us ... double quotes. If we don't document this, more people will die. And the police won't believe us without proof." Mason leaned forward. "I'll testify about what they tried to do to me." "But you're right. They'll claim it was a misunderstanding. We need evidence that can't be disputed." Blake made his decision. "Okay, but we do this professionally. No unauthorized entry, no illegal surveillance. We document what we can see from public property and call for help if we witness actual crimes in progress." We spent the next hour planning our approach. Blake had portable camera equipment that could record high-definition video in low-light conditions. Mason knew the area around the warehouse from his real estate connections. And I understood enough about Meridian's operation to predict when and how they would conduct their procedures. Based on the files I saw, they usually conduct procedures between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., I explained. Late enough to avoid witnesses, early enough to deliver bodies to the morgue before morning staff arrives. How do they transport the victims? Medical vans, usually. They make it look like legitimate patient transport. Blake checked his equipment one more time. "If we see evidence of a crime in progress, I'm calling 911 immediately. Agreed?" "Agreed." But as we prepared to leave the diner, my phone rang. Dr. Carver's number appeared on the screen. Don't answer it, Blake advised, but I knew that ignoring Dr. Carver would only make things worse. I accepted the call. Lucas, where are you? Safe. The police are looking for you. There's a warrant for your arrest on charges of stalking, making terroristic threats, and interfering with medical procedures. I saved Mason Calloway's life. You disrupted a legitimate medical examination and caused a patient to remove a necessary IV line. Mr. Calloway was taken to the emergency room after you left, suffering from complications related to his stress test. I looked at Mason, who was sitting across from me looking perfectly fine, except for the small bandage on his hand where he'd removed the 4. That's a lie. Lucas, you're in serious trouble. But Dr. Donnelly is willing to drop the charges if you surrender yourself for psychiatric evaluation. She believes you need help, not prison. What about the evidence I found? The hidden files. What evidence? The materials you stole from a restricted area of the morgue? Those files are related to ongoing research collaborations with legitimate pharmaceutical companies. Your misinterpretation of confidential medical documents doesn't constitute evidence of criminal activity. Dr. Carver had an answer for everything. The conspiracy was too well planned, too thoroughly protected by legitimate-seeming explanations. Lucas, I'm going to give you one last opportunity to resolve this situation quietly. Meet me at the morgue tonight at midnight. We can discuss your concerns and arrange for the help you need. Why midnight? Because that's when I can ensure privacy for our conversation. Away from the chaos you've created today. The offer sounded like a trap, but it might also be an opportunity. If I could get Dr. Carver to admit her involvement in the murders while Blake was recording, I'll be there. Good? And Lucas, come alone. Involving anyone else will only make things worse for everyone. After she hung up, I explained the conversation to Blake and Mason. It's obviously a trap, Blake said, but it might be our best chance to get a recorded confession. Mason shook his head. They'll kill you. Not if Blake is there with camera equipment. They can't murder someone on video. Can't they? Blake asked. These people have killed 28 others. What makes you think they'll hesitate to kill? You? He was right. But I also knew that without definitive proof of the conspiracy, more people would die, and the killers would never be brought to justice. I'm going to the morgue at midnight, I decided. With or without help, Blake sighed. Then I guess we're all going. But we're documenting everything from a safe distance, and we're calling for backup the moment anything goes wrong. What about? Me? Mason asked. You're going home to your wife, I said. And you're going to act like nothing happened today. While she's planning my murder? While we gather evidence to prove she's planning your murder. If you confront her now, you'll destroy our only chance to expose the whole operation. Mason didn't like it, but he understood the logic. Jennifer Calloway couldn't know that her murder plot had been discovered. Not yet. At 11:30 p.m., Blake and I drove toward County Memorial Morgue, knowing we were walking into a trap, but hoping we could document enough evidence to destroy the conspiracy before it destroyed us. The morgue building looked different at night, more sinister, more threatening. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the parking lot, and the windows were dark, except for the security lights in the main corridors. Dr. Carver wasn't the only one who would be there tonight. According to the activity we'd observed at the warehouse, Meridian Biologics was conducting another procedure. I suspected that procedure would be taking place in the one location they thought was completely secure, the morgue itself. Blake positioned himself across the street from the morgue with a clear view of the main entrance and loading dock. His camera equipment was hidden in a maintenance van he borrowed from the news station, giving him mobility and cover while recording whatever happened. Testing audio, he whispered into his headset. Lucas, can you hear me? I touched the tiny wireless microphone he'd clipped inside my jacket. Clear. Remember, I'm recording everything. Whatever happens in there, we'll have evidence. At 11:55 p.m., I walked across the empty parking lot toward the morgue entrance. My key card still worked, and the familiar chemical smell of formaldehyde greeted me as I stepped inside. But something was different tonight. There were lights on in areas that should have been dark, and I could hear voices coming from the preparation room. Dr. Carver wasn't alone. I moved carefully through the corridors, staying in the shadows between the emergency lights. As I got closer to the preparation room, the voices became clearer. "The subject arrived 20 minutes ago," someone was saying. A male voice I didn't recognize. "Excellent. Dr. Donnelly wants the procedure completed before 2 a.m., so we can process the body through normal channels." That was Dr. Carver's voice. She was discussing another murder, as if it were routine medical business. I crept closer to the preparation room door and peered through the small window. What I saw made my blood freeze. A woman was lying on one of the examination tables, unconscious but clearly alive. 4 lines were connected to her arms, and monitoring equipment showed her vital signs. She matched the description of Rebecca Stone from the victim files. Dr. Carver and 2 other people in medical scrubs were preparing syringes and checking dosages on a tablet computer. This wasn't just a murder. It was a live human experiment. "Blake," I whispered into my microphone, "they have a living victim in here. Rebecca Stone. They're about to kill her. I'm calling 911. Blake's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Wait, we need to document what they're doing first, or they'll claim it was legitimate medical treatment." I activated the camera app on my phone and started recording through the door window. The video quality wasn't great, but it clearly showed an unconscious woman being prepared for what looked like lethal injection. Dr. Carver picked up one of the syringes and checked the dosage. "This compound should produce cardiac arrest within 15 minutes. Make sure the monitors are recording all vital signs." "Understood. What about the disposal protocol? Standard procedure." "The body goes to examination room 3 for preparation. I'll complete the death certificate listing cardiac arrest due to underlying health conditions." They were discussing murder and cover-up as if it were a routine medical procedure. But more importantly, they were doing it on camera. "The subject's insurance policy is worth $800,000, the male technician continued. "The beneficiary will receive payment within 2 weeks. And our research fee? $200,000, as agreed. Dr. Donnelly has already prepared the data analysis forms. I had everything I needed. Video evidence of them preparing to commit murder, audio of them discussing the insurance fraud, documentation of the entire conspiracy. But Rebecca Stone was still alive, and I couldn't let them kill her while I stood by recording. I put away my phone and stepped into the preparation room. Dr. Carver. All 3 people spun around, startled by my presence. Dr. Carver recovered first, her expression shifting from surprised to calculated calm. "Lucas, you're early. I'm here to stop you from murdering Rebecca Stone." The male technician moved toward an alarm button on the wall, but Dr. Carver stopped him with a gesture. "Lucas, you're misunderstanding what you're seeing. Ms. Stone is participating in a clinical trial for a new cardiac medication. This is legitimate medical research. Research that's designed to kill her. Research that carries certain risks. Yes, but Ms. Stone signed all the necessary consent forms while she was unconscious." Dr. Carver's mask slipped slightly. "Ms. Stone gave consent during her initial consultation. What you're seeing is the administration of the experimental compound." I looked at Rebecca Stone's unconscious form, connected to machines that would monitor her death in real time. "She has no idea what you're about to do to her. That's irrelevant. Legal consent has been obtained from her husband, who's paying you to kill her for the insurance money." Dr. Carver's expression hardened. "Lucas, you're making very serious allegations based on information you don't understand." The second technician, a woman I didn't recognize, was quietly preparing another syringe. But this one wasn't labeled for Rebecca Stone. That's for me, isn't it? I said. You're clearly experiencing a psychological crisis, Dr. Carver replied. This medication will help calm your delusions. It will stop my heart, just like the others. It will provide the medical intervention you desperately need. The female technician moved closer, holding the syringe like a weapon. But she didn't know about the camera equipment Blake had hidden on me, or the fact that everything was being recorded and transmitted. Blake, I said quietly, call 911 now. Dr. Carver heard me. Blake? Who is Blake? The investigative journalist who's been recording everything that's happened here tonight. For the first time, Dr. Carver looked genuinely alarmed. You're wearing recording equipment. Video and audio. Everything you've said and done is documented. The male technician reached for his phone, probably to call for help or warn other members of the conspiracy. But before he could complete the call, alarms started sounding throughout the building. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. This is over, I told Dr. Carver, but she smiled coldly and picked up the syringe intended for Rebecca Stone. No, Lucas, this is just beginning. Dr. Carver moved toward Rebecca Stone with the syringe, but I stepped between them. You're not killing anyone else. Lucas, you don't understand the forces you're dealing with. This operation has support at levels you can't imagine. I understand that you're a murderer who's been hiding behind medical credentials. The police sirens were getting louder, but Dr. Carver didn't seem concerned. If anything, she looked more confident. Those sirens aren't coming to help you, she said. They're coming to arrest you for stalking, terroristic threats, and interfering with medical procedures. Blake has video evidence of everything. They can't ignore Blake Whitaker. Dr. Carver laughed. The journalist who's been under investigation. For fabricating news stories? Who's facing criminal charges for harassment and invasion of privacy? My stomach dropped. They'd gotten to Blake, too. Even if his recordings were legitimate, which they're not, it would show a delusional individual disrupting a legal medical procedure. Dr. Donnelly has all the necessary documentation proving Ms. Stone's consent. The female technician moved closer with the second syringe. Dr. Carver, we need to complete both procedures before the authorities arrive. Agreed. Administer the cardiac compound to Ms. Stone. I'll handle Mr. Harrow. But as Dr. Carver approached me with the lethal injection, the lights suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, casting everything in an eerie red glow. In the confusion, I grabbed the syringe from Dr. Carver's hand and threw it across the room, where it shattered against the wall. Security breach in Sector 7, a voice announced over the building's PA system. All personnel to emergency stations. Dr. Carver grabbed a radio from her belt. This is Carver. What's the status of the police response? Dr. Carver, we have a problem. Multiple agencies are responding. FBI, state police, county sheriff. This isn't just about the stalking charges. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Blake's evidence had reached the right people. How is that possible? Unknown. But we have federal agents requesting entry to the facility. Dr. Carver looked at me with hatred and fear. You have no idea what you've destroyed. 28 murders. That's what I've destroyed. The male technician was frantically disconnecting Rebecca Stone from the monitoring equipment. We need to evacuate her to the secondary facility. No, Dr. Carver said. Complete the procedure. Now. But the authorities will find a patient who died during a legitimate clinical trial. We have all the necessary paperwork. The female technician prepared a new syringe from a vial she pulled from a refrigerated case. This is the last of the cardiac compound. Use it. I moved toward Rebecca Stone's examination table, but the male technician blocked my path. He was bigger than me, trained in restraining patients, but he wasn't expecting Blake Whitaker to burst through the door with a news camera and bright lights. This is Blake Whitaker, Channel 7 News, broadcasting live from County Memorial Morgue, where we're documenting an active murder conspiracy. The camera lights illuminated the entire scene. Rebecca Stone unconscious on the table. Medical personnel preparing lethal injections. Monitoring equipment designed to record her death. Dr. Carver shield her eyes from the bright lights. Turn that off. This is a private medical facility. This is a public building where crimes against humanity are being committed. Blake replied, keeping the camera rolling. The female technician tried to inject Rebecca Stone anyway, but I tackled her. Before she could complete the procedure, the syringe went flying, its contents spilling across the floor. "Federal agents," a voice shouted from the corridor. Everyone on the ground. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded into the preparation room, weapons drawn, shouting commands for everyone to get down. Dr. Carver tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The morgue was surrounded. As the agents secured the scene, I knelt beside Rebecca Stone's examination table. She was unconscious, but breathing steadily. Whatever they'd given her to sedate her was wearing off. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" One of the FBI agents asked her. Rebecca's eyes fluttered open. She looked around in confusion at the medical equipment, the federal agents, the news camera. Where am I? "You're safe," I told her. "You're in a hospital, but you're safe now." I don't remember. I was supposed to meet my husband for dinner. "Ma'am, we're going to get you to a real hospital for evaluation," the FBI agent said. "But first, can you tell us how you got here?" Someone called. Said there was an emergency. My husband had been in an accident. It was the same pattern as the others. Rebecca had been lured to the facility under false pretenses, sedated, and prepared for murder. But this time, we'd stopped it. Blake continued broadcasting as the FBI agents arrested Dr. Carver and her associates. This is the culmination of an 18-month investigation into a murder-for-hire conspiracy that has claimed at least 28 lives. Dr. Carver glared at me as they put her in handcuffs. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. This operation was protecting people from far worse alternatives." Protecting who? Protecting society from people who were drains on the system, protecting families from financial burdens, protecting the advancement of medical science. Even in custody, she was still justifying mass murder as a public service. As they led her away, more FBI agents arrived with search warrants for the hidden files I'd discovered. Everything was being documented, cataloged, preserved as evidence. Blake finished his live broadcast and turned to me. "Lucas, you realize you've just exposed one of the largest medical fraud conspiracies in history?" "I just wanted to save Rebecca Stone." "You saved a lot more than that." But I knew the investigation was just beginning. Dr. Carver and Dr. Donnelly were just the operational level of the conspiracy. Someone higher up had been funding the operation, providing the victims, arranging the insurance policies. The real masterminds were still out there. The FBI spent the next 6 hours searching the morgue and documenting evidence. Agent Sarah Martinez, who was leading the investigation, found the hidden archive behind the freezer units exactly where I described it. 28 victim files. She confirmed. Payment receipts totaling over $4 million. Insurance policies worth more than $15 million. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. But as dawn broke over the medical district, Agent Martinez pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Lucas, we need to talk about the larger investigation." Larger investigation? This morgue operation was just one part of a multi-state network. We've been tracking Meridian Biologics for 6 months, but we couldn't prove criminal activity until you provided the evidence. She showed me a map with red pins marking locations across 3 states. Similar operations in Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Denver, all using the same model: fake medical facilities, insurance fraud, illegal human experimentation. How many victims? We estimate over 200 deaths in the past 2 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. I'd thought we were dealing with a local conspiracy, but this was a massive criminal enterprise. Who's running it? That's what we need to find out. Dr. Carver and Dr. Donnelly are cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences, but they only know their immediate supervisors. Agent Martinez handed me a folder containing photographs and documents. We need you to look at these and tell us if you recognize anyone. The first photo showed a man in his 50s, well-dressed, corporate appearance. The caption identified him as Grant Holloway, CEO, Meridian Holdings. I'd seen his name in the business registration documents, but this was my first time seeing his face. He looked like any other successful businessman. The second photo made my blood freeze. Mason Calloway's wife, Jennifer, sitting across a restaurant table from Grant Holloway. The timestamp showed the photo was taken 3 days before Mason scheduled. Murder. Jennifer Calloway isn't just a client, I realized. She's part of the operation. Regional Coordinator for Victim Identification and Insurance Verification, Agent Martinez confirmed. She's been recruiting clients and targets for 18 months. The scope of Jennifer's involvement was horrifying. She hadn't just arranged her husband's murder. She'd been helping arrange dozens of murders. Where is she now? Under surveillance. We're hoping she'll lead us to other conspirators before we arrest her. Agent Martinez's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and looked up with concern. We have a problem. Jennifer Calloway just received a message telling her to initiate emergency protocols. She's moving toward a secondary facility. Where? The warehouse you and Blake observed yesterday. Apparently, it's more than just a research facility. It's their crisis management center. We drove to the warehouse district with a convoy of FBI vehicles. But when we arrived, the building was already being evacuated. Trucks were removing equipment, documents were being destroyed, and several vehicles were leaving through a back exit. They're sanitizing the operation, Agent Martinez said through binoculars. I could see Jennifer Calloway directing the evacuation. She was calm, professional, treating the destruction of evidence like any other business operation. How did they know we were coming? Someone warned them. Someone with access to law enforcement communications. The realization that the conspiracy included corrupt police officials made everything more complicated. We weren't just fighting criminals. We were fighting a network that had infiltrated multiple levels of government and law enforcement. Agent Martinez coordinated the tactical response while I watched Jennifer Calloway through the binoculars. This was the woman Mason had loved, trusted, planned to start a family with. And she'd been planning his murder while they discussed baby names and vacation destinations. Federal agents. This facility is surrounded. The evacuation stopped. People emerged from the warehouse with their hands raised, but Jennifer was in Calloway. Was not among them. She's gone, one of the agents reported. Back exit leads to a parking structure. Multiple vehicles missing. Jennifer had escaped with Grant Holloway and probably several other key conspirators. The operational level of the network was destroyed, but the leadership was still at large. Agent Martinez looked frustrated. We've dealt a major blow to their operation, but they'll rebuild unless we catch the leadership. What about the other facilities? Philadelphia, Atlanta, Denver? Simultaneous raids are happening now. But if the leadership escapes, they'll set up new operations within months. As we processed the scene at the warehouse, I realized that saving Rebecca Stone and exposing the Morgue conspiracy was just the beginning. The real battle was against a network that treated human life as a commodity and murder as a business. Model Blake arrived with his news crew to document the warehouse raid. Lucas, this story is going national. But you realize you're now a target for anyone who escaped? He was right. Jennifer Calloway knew I was responsible for destroying her operation. Grant Holloway and his associates had lost millions of dollars because of my investigation. They'll come after you, Agent Martinez confirmed. We can offer protection, but these people have resources and connections we're still trying to understand. What about Mason? Is he safe? Mason Calloway is in protective custody when he learns the full scope of his wife's involvement. Agent Martinez shook her head. He's going to need extensive counseling. As we drove back toward town, I thought about the 28 people who had died before I understood what was happening. Marcus Chun, Amanda Foster, Kevin Walsh, Sarah Whitcomb, all killed by people they trusted, for money they never knew existed. But Rebecca Stone was alive. David Kim, who was scheduled to die next week, would be warned and protected. The network was damaged, possibly destroyed. Agent Martinez, what happens now? Now we build cases against everyone we can identify. We trace the money, follow the connections, shut down the remaining operations. And if the leadership rebuilds somewhere else, then we'll find them and shut them down again. But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Criminal networks like this. One adapted, evolved, found new ways to exploit the system. The war against Meridian Biologics was just beginning. 3 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Dr. Emily Carver take the witness stand in her own defense. She wore an orange jumpsuit instead of medical scrubs, but she maintained the same clinical composure she'd shown while discussing murder procedures. Dr. Carver, her attorney began, please explain to the jury your understanding of the Meridian Biologics Research Program. We were conducting legitimate pharmaceutical research under controlled conditions. The subjects who participated were volunteers who understood the risks involved. It was the same lie she'd been telling since her arrest, but now we had evidence to prove otherwise. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chun, no relation to victim Marcus Chun, presented the hidden files I'd discovered, the recorded conversations Blake had captured, and testimony from surviving family members who had no idea their relatives were being murdered. Dr. Carver, Sean said during cross-examination, did any of the 28 victims explicitly consent to participate in potentially lethal drug trials? Consent was obtained through proper channels, through their spouses or relatives who were paying to have them killed? That's a mischaracterization of the research protocols. Sean displayed photos of the puncture wounds found on each victim. Can you explain why these injection sites were not documented in any official medical records? Research protocols sometimes require discretion to maintain the integrity of the data. Discretion or cover-up? Dr. Carver's attorney objected, but the damage was done. Every answer she gave made her sound more guilty. The trial had been going on for 2 weeks, and the evidence was overwhelming. Payment receipts, victim profiles, recorded confessions, live video of attempted murder. Dr. Carver was facing life in prison without parole, but she wasn't the only one on trial. In a separate courtroom, Dr. Rachel Donnelly was being prosecuted for running the Meridian Biologics operation. Unlike Dr. Carver, she had decided to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. Dr. Donnelly, the prosecutor asked, how many people did you personally inject with lethal compounds? 14 individuals over 18 months. And what was your understanding of why these people were being killed? They were research subjects selected based on specific criteria. We were testing cardiac response to various pharmaceutical compounds. Research subjects who were actually murder victims. I believed we were conducting legitimate medical research. But Dr. Donnelly's cooperation had helped the FBI trace the network's connections to other states and identify dozens of additional conspirators. Grant Holloway, the network's CEO, was being tried separately on federal racketeering charges. His trial wouldn't begin for another 6 months, but the evidence against him was substantial. Jennifer Calloway remained at large, despite an international manhunt. She'd disappeared with over $2 million in network funds, and was suspected of establishing new operations in Europe. Mason sat beside me in the courtroom gallery, watching his wife's former associates face justice. The revelation of Jennifer's involvement had devastated him, but he'd become one of the prosecution's most effective witnesses. Mr. Calloway, the prosecutor had asked during his testimony, did your wife ever discuss her work with victim identification? She never told me she was working for Meridian Biologics. She said she was doing consulting work for insurance companies. And the life insurance policy she encouraged you to purchase? She said it was standard financial planning for couples trying to start a family. Mason's voice had broken when he described how Jennifer had scheduled his murder appointment while pretending to care about his health. The trial was also revealing the scope of law enforcement corruption that had enabled the network to operate. 3 police officers and 1 detective had been arrested for providing protection and intelligence to Meridian Biologics. Detective Morrison, who had dismissed my initial reports about the murders, was facing charges for obstruction of justice and conspiracy. Your Honor, Dr. Carver's attorney said during closing arguments, my client believed she was participating in legitimate medical research. She had no knowledge of any insurance fraud or murder-for-hire activities. But the prosecution's closing argument was devastating. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence shows that Dr. Carver was a key participant in a conspiracy that murdered 28 innocent people for money. She falsified death certificates, destroyed evidence, and threatened witnesses. This was not medical research. This was systematic murder for profit. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, guilty. 27 guilty verdicts in total. Dr. Carver would spend the rest of her life in federal prison. After the verdict, Agent Martinez found me in the courthouse corridor. Lucas, this conviction wouldn't have been possible without your investigation. You saved lives and brought justice to 28 families. What about the network? Are there still operations running? We've shut down facilities in 4 states and arrested over 40 conspirators. But you're right, networks like this adapt. We're monitoring for signs of new operations. Blake Whitaker approached with his news crew. His reporting on the Meridian Biologics conspiracy had won several journalism awards and led to policy changes in medical facility oversight. Lucas, any thoughts on the verdict? I'm glad Dr. Carver will never be able to hurt anyone else. But this case shows how easily people can exploit the medical system for criminal purposes. What's next for you? I'd been offered positions with several law enforcement agencies and medical examiner offices, but I decided on something different. I'm starting a foundation to help families affected by medical fraud. Too many people suffered because no one was paying attention to the warning signs. The Lucas Harrow Foundation for Medical Ethics would provide resources for identifying and reporting suspicious medical activities. We'd work with law enforcement, medical professionals, and insurance companies to prevent future conspiracies. As I left the courthouse, I thought about Owen Pratt, the security guard who tried to warn me about the dangers of asking questions. He'd been found safe in another state, living under a new identity after fleeing when he realized the scope of the conspiracy. Tommy Martinez, the previous morgue technician, had also been located. He'd discovered evidence of the murders 6 months before me, but had been too frightened to report it. Both men would be testifying in the upcoming trials of Grant Holloway and the other network leaders. The Meridian Biologics conspiracy was finally coming to an end, but the fight against medical fraud would continue, because someone else was probably planning to turn medicine into murder, and we needed to be ready to stop them. 6 months after Dr. Carver's conviction, I stood in the lobby of St. Mary's Medical Center, my new workplace, watching families say goodbye to loved ones who would actually recover and go home. The contrast with my previous job couldn't have been more stark. I'd left the world of morgues and death certificates behind, taking a position as a medical ethics coordinator. My job now was to ensure that patients understood their treatment options, that consent forms were properly explained, and that medical procedures followed established protocols. It was preventive work, stopping problems before they became tragedies. Lucas, Dr. Amanda Rivera, the hospital's chief of staff, approached with a concerned expression. We need to discuss the Morrison case. Detective Morrison, the corrupt police officer who had dismissed my initial reports about the murders, was finally facing trial. His defense team was claiming that he'd been manipulated by the Meridian Biologics Network and hadn't understood the scope of their criminal activities. What do they need from me? Testimony about his specific responses to your reports. The prosecution wants to prove he deliberately ignored evidence of murder. I'd been testifying in related trials for months, helping prosecutors build cases against dozens of conspirators. Each trial revealed new details about how the network had operated and how many people had been involved. Grant Holloway's trial had concluded 2 weeks earlier, with a conviction on 47 counts of murder and racketeering. He'd been sentenced to life in prison without parole, but not before revealing the existence of similar networks operating internationally. The fight against medical murder was far from over. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason Calloway. Coffee later? Have news about the foundation. Mason had become an unlikely ally in establishing the Lucas Harrow Foundation for Medical Ethics. His experience as a near victim and his business background made him an effective advocate for reform. We'd secured funding from insurance companies, medical organizations, and crime victim advocacy groups. The foundation now operated in 12 states, providing resources for identifying suspicious medical activities and supporting families affected by medical fraud. 3 p.m. I met Mason at the same diner where we'd first planned our investigation, with Blake Whitaker. He looked healthier than he had in months. The haunted expression had been replaced by determined focus. The foundation received approval for the new monitoring program, he said. Starting next month, we'll have access to insurance databases to identify unusual patterns in death claims. That's exactly what we needed. The monitoring program would use artificial intelligence to flag suspicious patterns, multiple deaths with similar circumstances, unusual beneficiary changes, clusters of cardiac events in healthy young adults. It was designed to catch the next Meridian Biologics before they could kill dozens of people. There's something else, Mason continued. Agent Martinez called this morning. They think they've located Jennifer. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Where? Switzerland. She's been operating under a false identity, but they've connected her to a medical research facility that's been reporting unusual death rates. Jennifer Calloway was still in the murder business, just in a different country. Are they going to arrest her? They're working with Swiss authorities to build a case. But Lucas ... quotes, Mason's expression grew serious. She knows we're the ones who destroyed her operation. If she's caught, she might try to retaliate before trial. Agent Martinez had warned me about this possibility months ago. Criminal networks like Meridian Biologics didn't forgive people who cost them millions of dollars and sent their associates to prison. I'll be careful. I'm serious. These people have resources, connections, motivation to hurt you. But I'd made peace with the risks. 28 people had died because no one was willing to take those risks. If I'd stayed silent, Rebecca Stone would be dead, David Kim would be dead, and dozens more would have followed. Mason, we saved lives. That's worth whatever risks we face. He nodded, understanding the logic, even if he didn't like the danger. Blake. Whitaker arrived with his usual energy and a folder full of documents. His investigation of medical fraud had expanded into a national documentary series that was helping law enforcement agencies identify similar networks. Lucas, you need to see this, he said, spreading papers across our table. We've identified at least 6 other operations using the Meridian model. Fake medical facilities, insurance fraud, corrupt officials providing protection. The scope was staggering. What we'd thought was a regional conspiracy was actually a business model being replicated across the country. How many victims are we talking about? Conservative estimate? Over 500 deaths in the past 3 years. 500 families who'd lost loved ones to what they thought were natural causes or medical complications. 500 murders disguised as research or treatment. The good news, Blake continued, is that your foundation's monitoring program is already identifying suspicious patterns. 3 facilities have been flagged for investigation this month. We spent the next hour reviewing the evidence and planning how to share information with law enforcement agencies. The work was frustrating and overwhelming, but also deeply meaningful. Every suspicious pattern we identified might save someone's life. Every investigation we supported might prevent another family from experiencing what Mason had gone through. As evening approached, I walked back to my apartment, thinking about the strange path that had led me here. 3 years ago, I'd been a quiet morgue technician who just wanted to do his job without complications. Now, I was part of a national effort to reform medical oversight and prevent murder-for-hire conspiracies. The work would never be finished. Criminal networks would continue to evolve, finding new ways to exploit the medical system for profit. But now there were people watching, people who understood the warning signs, people willing to ask difficult questions. Rebecca Stone had sent me a card last week, thanking me for saving her life. She'd returned to work as a physical therapist and was engaged to a man who actually loved her instead of planning her murder. David Kim, the architect who would have been the next victim, had become a volunteer for the foundation. He used his design skills to create educational materials that helped medical professionals identify suspicious activities. The families of the 28 victims had found some measure of closure through the trials and convictions. Justice couldn't bring their loved ones back, but it ensured that their deaths weren't meaningless. As I unlocked my apartment door, I thought about Dr. Carver's final words at sentencing. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." She was right. I'd unleashed a movement to hold medical professionals accountable for their actions. I'd unleashed scrutiny of an industry that had operated with too little oversight for too long. I'd unleashed justice for people whose voices had been silenced by greed and corruption, and that was exactly what I'd intended to do. The quiet morgue technician was gone. In his place was someone who understood that sometimes the most important discoveries come from paying attention to details that everyone else wants to ignore, even when those details whisper of murder in the shadows of places we trust most.